I am going to make these checkboxes functional so that user could make multiple selections of these contacts to perform mass actions. For example, if you look at these contacts here, if you hover on any of these contacts, there is a checkbox, and if user clicks on this checkbox, this makes this contact selected, and you will see the header is changed, and you will see all of the mass actions that you can perform here. So here you have the manage label. Here you can, for example, you have selected more than one contacts. Here it would tell you the total number of the selected contacts. And here you can apply any label to all of these selected contacts. So for example, you want to attach a label to multiple contacts. You just select them and click on that label. That label would be attached to all of those selected contacts on the same time. So this is how you perform the mass actions in Google Contacts. Similarly, if you click on the send email button, this sends the email to all of these contacts. But we will not implement this one. We would implement the manage labels and the delete button. So as the first step, we will work on the delete button. So for example, if user selected multiple contacts and they click on the delete button, that would delete all of the selected contacts at once at the same time. So let's proceed, and let's try to implement the same thing in our project. So right now, this is what we have so far. These checkboxes are not very helpful yet because you can see I'm selecting, but it is not behaving like that. So we will make it look like that now. So whenever user click on any checkbox, we should keep track of those selected items somewhere in our JavaScript. So also, whenever we select it, then we can add a class on that element that would indicate that this contact is selected. So then once that class is added on that element, we can use that class in our CSS to style that element. For example, you can change the background color of that element, and you can hide the avatar icon if that class is available on that element. So let's try doing that. So this is the checkbox. Actually, this checkbox is the part of this entire HTML that was being generated automatically based on this loop. So this is this element, these rows are being generated when this render context function is called. So we can add an event here, or we can also add a global event listener on this. So here I can add another selector. Maybe I can call it contact row, and on window onload, it renders all of the contacts. It calls this function, and this function uh, generates the entire HTML for these rows, and it renders all of those elements into the layout. So after it is done, I want to register my event listener on these checkboxes. For that, I would add something, for example, document.query selector dot uh, so this is the class that I want to target. In that class, there is an input. So I would type input type checkbox. So the meaning of this syntax is that this is actually a selector. In this selector, I am saying that I want to select the checkbox uh, that is inside this class. So once I get that selector, I can add event listener on that. So this is how we should call this function. And in this function, we have to pass the name of the event that you want to listen on. And you need to provide the callback function as a second parameter of this function. So type the name of the event. I guess it is change. And after that, in the second parameter, I'm going to type the callback function. So whenever this event is listened, whenever this event is triggered from this input checkbox, then it would call our callback function immediately. So as soon as it would call our callback function, we can write our logic in this function that would perform all of the necessary tasks that we want to implement. So first of all, let's try to test if this event listener is working perfectly or not. For that, right now, I'm going to add only alert to see if that works. So I'm going to change it, and you can see I got an alert. So that's mean this event listener is working fine. Now, I also want to see the value that is coming from that input, from that checkbox. But if you look below in these checkboxes, I did not specify any value yet. So if you want to get the value, then you have to provide the value to every checkbox. So like we added the email, phone, and other things to every row. Similarly, we can also add the value to this checkbox by using the contact object. For that, type value, and here in the value, I'm going to get the ID of the contact. So this way, it is going to add the ID to every checkbox. For example, this checkbox might have 1, 2, 3, 4. It will have the ID for every contact. So whenever this checkbox is changed, I can get the value from that checkbox. So let's try to get the value. For that, I'm going to access the event that was triggered. So from that event, I would get the current target. That would be the input. And from that, I'm going to let's try to get the value. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to alert this value to see if we are getting what we want. So, okay, you can see that in the alert, we are getting the correct value that we want to get. But there is an issue. The issue is that this was working fine. This is working fine for only first checkbox, but not for others. The reason is that I would explain. This is a very interesting reason. Look at this. Here I am saying that please select us. I am trying to call a query selector, and I am providing a selector to it. So if you use query selector function, then it would select only very first element matching that selector. So here there are multiple elements with the same selector, but it is picking only the first element with that selector. So, but we want to select all of the elements with that selector, and we want to register the event listener on all of those elements. So for that, we have another function that is query selector all. With that, it would give us an array of all of the checkboxes, and then we will iterate over that array, and then we will register event on every checkbox one by one in that array. So let us try to add for each. So in this way, it would iterate over every checkbox one by one, and we will get checkbox, every checkbox here. So this is an array. So this is a simple concept of JavaScript. You already have learned how to use for each loop. So this is the same thing. So this is an array of the DOM elements, which are the checkboxes. And if you use for each, then you will get checkbox one by one from that array. So then you can use that checkbox or element in whatever way you want to use. So we have checkbox. I am going to use checkbox, and here I have added the event listener like this. So in this way, you are going to register this change event listener on every checkbox with the help of this for each loop, because this is a loop. This would run for every element of this array, and you will have the change event registered on every checkbox. Now, we have specified that on every checkbox, if there is a change event, then it would call this function. And we have added the alert. In that alert, we are trying to show the value of that input. So let's see if that works now. I have changed it and the value is 1. Now I'm going to change the last one. You will see again the value is 1. That is very strange. Why it is giving us same value? So first of all, let's look at our data set. Maybe we have incorrect IDs in our data set. Yes, that is right. In our data set, we have same ID for every contact. That is why it is giving us the same ID. So we have to correct that thing as well. So I'm going to make the ID unique for every contact. So for that, let's change it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's it. Now let's test it again, and you will see for the first element I am getting 1, and for the last element I am getting 7. So this is the ID that we are getting in the alert. So we can utilize it if we need it. So and for now I'm going to comment it out, and I want to make this row look like it is selected, like in Google Contact. You can see this first row is selected, this one is selected. You can see that the avatar has gone and the background color has been changed for the selected elements. So for that, I suggested you that we will add a class on the selected rows that would indicate that these rows are selected. So let's add those classes. Okay. So whenever a checkbox is changed, I want to select its nearest parent, that is contact row, and then I want to add a class on that. So let's try to do that. E dot current dot. So this is the DOM element, and in the DOM element we have a function that is closest. So in the closest, you have to provide the selector that you want to find. So I'm going to provide this one. In this way, it would look backward directions. It will look for the nearest parent with this selector. So for example, this is the checkbox, right? And I want to find the closest contact row selector. For that, it would look on the top direction on the nearest parent element. So its nearest parent element with that selector is this one. So it would select that element for us. So let's try to see, check if this has selected the correct element or not. So for that, uh, let's suppose it has selected the correct element. I want to see the all of the classes, list of the classes in that element. So in this case, there are two classes. So I want to see those classes. So I would alert it to see if it has those classes or not. Okay. All right. You can see that it is giving me the two classes from this element. So that's mean it has selected that element successfully, and now it has access to that DOM element, and now I can do anything with that DOM element. Right now, I'm just accessing the class list, but I can add more classes to this class list. For that, I can just call a function in the class list. There's a function that is add class list dot add, and here I can provide the class that I want to add here. So, for example, I want to add a class selected. And now let's see if that class is added to this element or not. So, so this is the element. I want to add the selected class over this element class list. So let's see. I have selected, and you can see the selected class has been added to this element. So perfect. So other rows don't have the selected because those are not selected yet. But if I select another one, then that selected would be added on those elements as well. And so this is working great so far, but we have to improve it further because right now it is adds that selected class. But if you unselect this element, it does not remove the selected class from it. So we have to see what's going on. So first of all, we need to check if that checkbox is checked or not. For that, let's try to see the value in the, let's see the checked property. Okay, so it is telling me that this checkbox is checked. And if I uncheck it, then it is giving me the false value. So you can see for the first time, it gives me true. And if you uncheck it, it gives you the false value. So we can use this value as our indicator that it is selected or unselected. So we want to add this class only if it is selected. Otherwise, we want to remove that classes in the reverse case, in the opposite case. So let's use this value in our condition. In my condition, I would say that if this is checked, then add the selected class. And if it is not selected in the else, I just want to remove the selected class because this is not selected anymore. So instead of add, I would call a function remove that would remove this class from the class list. So let's see if that works. I have selected it, the selected class has been added, and if I uncheck it, the selected class has been removed. Perfect. So it is working fine so far. But still, it is not, the UI does not show any difference. So to make sure that difference, we need to go back to the CSS and add the necessary styling. So find the table row in the CSS because we want to add background color on that row. So I have the table row here, and at the end of this selector, I want to add another selector that if we have selected class, uh, on this table row like this, then I want to add the background color. So let's see how it looks like. So uh, no, it did not work, I guess. Actually, it did not work because I did not start my compiler for the SASS. So let me try to run it. So in the package.json, we had created this script. So let's run it again to start the compiler in watch mode. All right. Now, if I make my change here, that would be compiled in the CSS file, and that will be reflected here. You can see that now this change is reflected, and we can see the difference now. But it is not looking good. The reason is that the background color is too dark, so I want to make it lighter. And let's see. All right, I think this looks better than before. Now it is showing the background color gray, but still it is showing the avatar. We don't want to show the avatar if it is selected. So for that, let's see. Here we already have some styling here. Actually, we are repeating the code. Let's fix it. Because here on hover, we do the exactly same thing that we want to do when it is selected. So why not use this chunk of code? For that, I am going to add another selector here. I want to say that it should behave like this on hover. Also, it should apply these styles if it has selected class on it. So if any of these two conditions true, then it would apply these styles on that element. So now we don't need this code anymore. So now this is how we reuse the code, and that is the best practice. You should not rewrite the code. So look at this. I have selected, and it is now behaving like the Google context now. Perfect. Next thing is that uh, we have to hide this header if at least one element is selected. So, for example, if one or more than one elements contacts are selected, then we should hide this header, and instead of this header, we should show this action bar on it, so that user could perform the mass actions on these selected contacts. So for that, let's see how we can handle that. So here we are interacting with the UI, but we also want to update the data that we have. So we have a second. So here we have the contacts. So I can change the main contacts array that is specified here. For example, where is it? Yeah. So this is the contacts array. So whenever a contact is selected, I want to add the selected property true like this on this object. So that would help me to get the selected elements whenever I want to retrieve them. So this is one of the approaches that you can use. There are other approaches as well that we can use, but let's use this one for now. But it's up to you, totally up to you. If you want to use a different approach, it's totally fine. So, so whenever the checkbox is changed and it is checked, then I want to get the specific contact object from that array, and I want to add the selected property is equal to true only on that one. So for that, let selected contact is equal to contacts dot find. Find function would return us only one contact. based on the condition that we are going to provide, uh, the condition that we are going to return from this callback function. So it is going to every contact one by one, and that would give that parameter to us in this callback function, and we can use that callback function. And we will see we need only that contact that matches with the contact ID of of this checkbox. For example, if this checkbox is selected, then we also have the ID of that checkbox, and we can get that ID from the e dot current target dot value. So here in this uh, from here we can get the ID. Let selected contact ID. So this is a variable. In this variable, we have the selected contact ID. So I can use it to compare in my condition. So I want to get only that contact whose ID is equal to the selected contact ID. So if this is the case, then that would return me that contact, and then I will save it in this variable. Now, if we find a contact from this array, then I want to add a property on that object with the value true. And in the reverse case, opposite case, by the way, as we need the selected contact object every time in both of these conditions, so instead of writing it inside this if condition, I'm going to move it on the outside of the condition. So in this way, I will have access to this selected contact in both of these conditions. So in the else, I want to set the selected is equal to false in that object. So for that, selected contact, actually first of all, let me check if we have selected contact. I want to change the selected is equal to false. So this way it would reverse the change that we made earlier here. So, and we can also observe these changes. I would, after every change, I would show the contacts in the console. So we will see the difference every time. So I selected the first one. Oops, something wrong. It is saying that we are trying to get the ID from the undefined, and the file is index.html. That is this one, and on the line number 203. So if we scroll up, this is the 203, and here it is saying that there is nothing with the contact. That is strange. Actually, there was a mistake in our JSON data. We had some empty data sets. For example, I have added comma twice. So that's mean after this object, we have empty value. So I will remove it. And similarly, we have this here. There should not be more than one comma, and remove the unnecessary comma if possible. Okay. Now, if I select, then that would every time it would show the contacts in the console, and we will see the difference if it has added the selected property true or not. So I have selected, we have 7 contacts, And here, if you open it, hmm, it did not add the it did not add the selected property. Let's see. The reason is that the ID is number. Here the type is number, and here the type of the selected contact is coming from the value of the input that is normally a string, and we are using with three equality operators. That's mean we are also comparing the type of the two variables. So to fix this, either remove the triple equal, add just add two equals, compare it with the two equals, or you can convert this thing into the number. For that, we have to parse it. For example, add the parse here. So if your IDs are pure numbers, then parse them like this. Okay, and this way it should work. Okay, you can see that it has the selected property equal true, but other ones have no selected property on them. So if I select the second one, then it would show the console again with those contacts, and in the second one you will see the selected true like before, and in other contexts we cannot see any selected property. So we are now saving the state in our context array. So we can use it if we want. So next we want to hide the header of this table. For example, name email. So this is the table head that I want to hide. For that, I want to add class on this element that would indicate that we should hide it. Uh, for example, if I add the hide class on it, then we will hide this element through the CSS. So first of all, let's add this class on it through the JavaScript. So every time a checkbox is changed, it would select or unselect the contacts, and after that is done, at the end I would check for the selected contacts. If the length of the selected contacts is more than 0, for example, if it is at least 1 or more than 1, then we will uh, hide this section. So for that, I'm going to get the selected contacts. Selected contacts is equal to contacts dot filter, and so with that filter I will return a condition for every contact, that if condition is matched with that contact, then only those contacts with the matching condition would be returned, and we will have them in this array. So contact dot id, if if we have contact dot selected true, then so it would return only those contacts which have the selected property true. So if so now we can use this array, we can use the length of this array to judge about the size of the selected elements. So if the length of the selected element is greater than 0, then that's mean we have some selected contacts And if we have selected context, then we want to add a class on this row. So and on this row, the class, the selector is table head. So let's select that element, document dot query selector, and pass the selector where you want to add the class, and add class list add, and add that class, that is hide. And if length in the opposite condition, uh, in the else block, I want to remove that class, because if there is no context selected, then that would go into this block. And if there are no contacts selected, then I don't want to have the hide class on it, because I want to display it again. So let's see if hide class is added on this element or not. So I'm going to select few contacts and watch. You can see the hide class is added. So it does not matter how many contacts you select. If selected contacts are more than 0, then it would add that. And if you unselect all of the contacts, then it would remove the hide class from it. Look, this it did not hide. So something is wrong. So let's see. Oh, sorry, we did not add the remove function. So we should remove it. So now let's see. So here we have the hide class, and if I unselect all of them, then the hide class would be removed. So now we can use this class in our CSS to hide this section. So the selector of this element is table head. So let's search for that selector, table head. And here I want that if there is hide class on it, then just display none. So let's see. So you can see as soon as I select something, then it applies this style on that element because of the hide class on it. Now, after it is hidden, we want to display the action bar there. So for that, I'm going back and add another element there. So instead of the table head, I want to show the div actions bar. So in this action bar, I would display some buttons and the number of the selected elements. So here, I want to show the buttons in this div, and in the second div, I want to show selected. I want to show the selected. For example, here you can see it is showing 2 selected. So instead of hard coding 2, I would just add a placeholder with an element, and I would add a selector on this element, for example. Number of selected contents. Okay, so we will use this selector later to fill the number of the contacts in this div. So, but before that, let's style this first and see how it looks like. So you can see that this is how it is looking right now, and that is looking very, very bad. So let's fix it. First, I am going to copy the action bar, and along with the table head, after the table head, I will style this selector, and I would say I want to add display flex on it so that it could show in the horizontal direction. And now I want to justify the content so that it could push each other toward the edges of the container. So for that, add justify content space between. It would add the maximum space between these two elements. In this way, these two would be pushed toward the corners. So, okay, now I want to add the specific width to the right section. For that, I'm just going to hard code the width 200 pixels, and let's see. No, it is not working. Why is that? The reason is that it does not matter if you add width or not. It is behaving like that because we have a div, and this text is outside of a div. So if you have a div, then div behaves like a block, and it consumes the entire available space, and it pushes the next element or thing in the second row. So this is what it is doing. So to fix it, I need to add another class, right section, and I can use the selector inside the action bar. I would say that I want to add display flags. So with that, it would show these two things in one row for us. Okay, and now you can see it is in one row instead of two rows. And now I want to add some gap between these two things. For that, add gap 10 pixels, and 10 is too much, so I'm going to reduce it to 5 pixels. And now I want to reduce the font size, and it should also be the blue color. Font size should be 12 pixels, and the color should be blue. Okay. Next, I also want to show the border below this row. For that, add the border bottom 1 pixel solid. Okay, we will hide this one after the styling is completed, and this row should be visible only if some contacts are selected. Okay. Also, there should be a padding bottom, I guess. But let's see what we can do with the flex box. Okay, we need to add a fixed height to it. So I'm going to add height, say 40 pixels. Let's try 30. Okay, and yeah, these things are not in the vertically in the middle. So to do that, we need to add align items center. Okay, now if you hover on this element, you will see that the button and the selected word are vertically in the middle of the row. So that is perfect now. Now I want to fill this number with the correct selected element, selected contacts. So I'm going to remove this one, and here whenever we select something at the end, when we do this, I also every time a checkbox is changed, I want to update this number. So for that, select document.query selector, and replace the inner HTML with the total number of the contracts, and we can get the total number of the contracts by using the array.length. Okay, now if you select something, you will see the number would change in the real time. Look at this, the number is being changed in the real time. So by default, the action bar should not be visible. For that, I'm going to remove the display flex, and I would add the display flex only if it has the active class in it. So if there is an active class in it, then I want to add display flex. Otherwise, it should be display none. Now, right now, you can see that it is not visible. And even I select something, it is still not visible. The reason is that we did not add the active class yet if something is selected. So whenever we hide the table head, at the same time, we need to display the actions bar. For that, select the selector and put it here. And I want to add class on that element, then the class should be active. And if you are showing the table head again, then at the same time, we need to hide the actions bar because we don't need the actions bar at that time. So I am just going to remove the active class from the actions bar. So let's see how it works. Okay, now you can see that it is working perfectly. So as soon as you unselect everyone, then it would be hidden and the original table head would be visible. Now let's add some useful buttons here. For example, I want to add the labels icon. So I'm going to get the label icon from here and I will put it here. For example, instead of this, I have added the, by the way, you don't need button. Button is not compulsory. You can just style that icon directly. So we have the tag and we also need the delete button. So let's try to guess the delete icon. No, that is incorrect. Remove. I want to use the basket. No, that's correct. No, we have to find it from the internet. So font awesome icons, and I want to find the delete. So yeah, the name of this icon is trash. So let's type trash, and now you will see the trash icon. So if user click on the trash icon, then that would remove all of the selected contents. And if user click on the label, then that would uh, show a list of the labels. And if user pick one of those labels, then that label would be applied on all of the selected contents. Also, I want to add some gap between these two buttons. For that, in the actions bar, I'm in the style, I would use flexbox styling. This should be a class, and here add display flex, and I also want to add gap of 10 pixels. Let's see. Okay, I think that is perfect. Now I want to style this button. For example, the color should be blue and there should be a cursor pointer on that if you hover on them. So for that, in the buttons, I have the eye selector. This is the eye selector. So every eye selector in the buttons is a button. So I want to add that cursor pointer, and the color should be this blue. Okay, so I think it is looking perfect, but I also feel that the height is too small for this column, this row. So let's try 40 pixel. 40 is still less. Let's try 60. This is now looking very strange. So let's reduce it to the 50. And okay, I think this is now perfect, but I want a padding on the left side. For that, in the buttons, I want padding left 20 pixels. All right, so I think it is fine. Or maybe less padding. Okay, I think that is perfect. So now uh, now we want to remove the selected contacts. So it is very easy at this stage now because uh, we have every information. So whenever a user clicks on the delete icon, I want to call a function that would be on click. I want to call a function delete selected contacts. Okay. And whenever this function is called, it would remove the selected contacts from this array. And after that contact is removed from that array, I would call this function render contacts once again. So whenever I call this function would make the row empty, and it would reuse the context array and render the HTML elements again by using the available contacts. Okay, so let's create the function that I want to use now. This function in this, let's remove the selected context, and it is very easy. First of all, we need the ID array of the selected contact IDs. For that, it is very easy. Define a variable let selected contact IDs is equal to uh, contacts dot map. So you know about map. If you use map function on an array, that would return you another modified array. So whatever you would return from the map function, map callback function, that would be the part of the new array that it would return at the end. So I am going to pass a callback function, and in every callback function we are getting every contact one by one, and I just need the ID, so I'm going to return the contact.id. So in this way I'm returning only ID. So that's mean at the end we will have a new array with only the IDs that we returned for every contact, and that new array would be saved in this variable. So now we have IDs. Now I'm going to remove these the contacts with these IDs from the main contacts array. This is the main contacts array. Okay. So now I'm going to replace the context variable with the new array that we will get from the filter function, context.filter. And in the filter function, I'm going to pass the parameter and a callback function. In that callback function, I'm going to return the uh, condition that would be used to get the desired contact. So we need only those contacts uh, that does only those contacts whose ID does not exist in this array of the contact ID, because these are the contact IDs that should not be in our list anymore. So for that, I would just say only keep those contacts uh, only keep those contacts whose ID does not exist. So if you don't add not, then that's mean it is saying that only keep those contacts that whose ID exist in this array, but we don't need them. So I'm saying that I need only those contacts whose IDs does not include in this array. So let's after it is updated, this context array would have only those context objects that were not selected, and all other uh, selected contexts would be removed. So here is something, there is a mistake here. We should not get the IDs of all of the contacts. We should get the IDs only, IDs of only selected contacts. For that, I'm going to filter it first. For that, I'm going to make it easier, simple. So instead of doing that in the same line, I would create another variable like selected contact is equal to this. Instead of map, I'm going to use filter. I need only selected. For that, I would return, would get only those contexts which has the selected property true. So this way, it would give us an array with only those contexts which has the selected property true. Now we have the array of the selected contexts. I can use them to return the IDs of those contexts. Now I have the IDs of those contexts, and with this, I will get the contexts that should be there in the DOM. Now I'm ready to call this function because I have updated the context array. So now if I call this function after this line, it would use the new context array that we just updated. So let's call it and see. Let's see how it works. So for example, I want to remove the David. If I click on that, something wrong happened. So let's see what's going on. Go to the console. It is saying that selected context is not a function. Let's see what's going on here. Sorry, we made a mistake. This is not, we wanted to call the render context, not the selected context. So that was a funny mistake. So let's try again. I want to remove David, and you can see the David has been removed, but there is one problem. Now there is no selected element, but it is still saying that one selected. So we want to fix that. In order to fix that, uh, we should write the same code again that we wrote earlier when somebody uh, checks or selects a contact. So as I told you earlier that rewriting the same code is not a good idea. So you should not repeat code. You should try to reuse the code. So let's look at that code and we will try to reuse it. So for example, here, this is the code that if we add there, then it would update the selected contacts. Okay. So I'm going to move that code into the another function update number of selected contacts, and I will pass it there. So it's something is wrong. Okay, cut it from here, paste it here, and instead call this function. And we also need to pass the selected contacts. Actually, just pass the number. We now have, sorry, now we have only the total number that we can use here. And now I can reuse this function here. So I want to update the number. So here I need to pass the total selected contacts. Okay. So to get the selected contacts, we have to call this, we have to run this line once again. This way it would give us the updated selected contacts. But the issue is that we are repeating code. That is again bad thing. So let's move this code inside another function that would be get selected contacts, and I'm going to cut it and move it there and return it from there. And instead of that, I will call this function. This way, if I call this function would return the same thing that we were getting earlier. So now I can reuse this function, and I can update the selected contacts with this. So this would give me the new version of the new array of the selected contacts, and I can use that variable inside this to pass the length. So let's see if that works. So for example, I have selected 3 elements. It is showing 3. If I remove all of them, then it should show 0 there. And so we have another issue, selected contacts before initialization. So what's going on there? Okay, we should we should not uh, use the same name for the function and the variable. We should have a different name for this function. I'm going to use get selected from contacts. Same for this one. So for example, I selected 2. If I delete both of them, then you saw that it has updated the counter. So that is great. But also at the same time, as at this time, there are no selected contacts yet. That's why there is no sense in showing this action bar. So if there are, after deleting, if there are no selected contacts remaining, then just hide this section and show the default header row again. So for that, we already have a code here. So this section, this part, let's try to understand. So we need to add the same code there. So this part actually hides the table head and show the action bar, and in the else condition it do the opposite. So what if we move this section into another function so that we could reuse this? So I'm going to create another function. I would call it show hide table head. So this would hide or show table head based on the suitable conditions. So I am going to call this function instead, and here it is getting the selected contacts. It depends on the selected contacts. Now we either you can pass the selected contacts, or you can call the function that we just made to get the selected contacts. So let's just pass this function into it. Now we have the selected contacts, and based on the this parameter, it would decide if it wants to hide or show the table name. So now I can reuse this. So whenever I delete something, I want to update this row as well. For if nothing is selected, then this should be visible again. So let's call that function, and I want to pass the selected contacts to it. Now let's see. So I selected 2 contacts, and if I delete both of them, then you can see that as nothing is selected here anymore, that's why the default header is visible and the action bar has been removed. So that is perfect. That's what I wanted to do. So Next thing is that on hover, I want to show a delete icon on the right side of every row. So for that, go back to the HTML for the row. So this is the HTML of that row. In that HTML, I'm going to add another column, or maybe we don't need a column, maybe, or maybe we need it. So let's add a column. I added another column, and I'm going to add a style. For that column, I need only width of 40 pixels. Okay. And sorry, we don't need this thing for this one. And here we need a delete icon, the same icon that we have here. So I'm going to cut it, copy it from the inspect element. And so I have added the element here. And also, if we have another column, then we should add the column in the header as well. So, so I am going to add another div, and here I want to add the same width. Okay, now you can see there is a delete button, but that is very strange. It should not look like it. It should not be visible by default. It should be visible only when you hover them, or if you select. Uh, no, we should not show on select. We should show the delete button only if you are hovering on them. So for that, uh, let's see what we can do here. So inspect this one. So on table row, so this is the table row. So on table row, if we hover like this, but I'm going to move. I have to declare the hover selector again because I don't want to use the selected property selector for this style that I'm going to add. Hover. So on hover, actually before hover, I want to uh, hide the action buttons. So I would wrap this button into the action buttons div. So I have wrapped this in the action buttons. Now I would, by default, I want to hide it, display none. And as soon as user hover uh, on the table row, then I want to display the action button again. Display below. So let's see if that works. So you can see that by default delete button is hidden, but when I hover on them, then the delete button is visible. Now, next thing is that whenever I click on that button, that it should delete only that specific contact, not all selected. For example, I selected 4 of them, and if I click on this delete button, then it should not delete all of these selected. It should delete only that one contact. So that's mean this function is not very useful for me. So so maybe we may have to create another function, and maybe we may have to refactor this function. Let's see what we can do. Uh, so I will create another function, delete contacts. Okay, contacts COM. Okay, and this function would depend on the parameters, so it needs contacts to delete. And I'm going to, once again, or maybe if you want to make it simple, you can just pass, you can also expect for a parameter, for example, contacts selected contacts. So here, if selected contacts are coming from the parameter, then we will not get from that function. We will use them from here. For example, if we have the selected context defined, then use the selected context. Otherwise, get it from this function. So now we can just reuse this function uh, here. And now we have to pass, by the way, one second. So here we also have to provide the default value. Otherwise, if you don't pass a value, then it will fail. So by default, I am saying that it is undefined. So I hope that it will not crash now. So here, this time we have to pass an array, and in that array, I would obviously pass only one contact. Actually, I need to define another function, function delete contact, okay? And this function then call this function, okay? And this function delete contact would expect an ID, contact ID. And now we will get that contact, let contact is equal to contacts dot find contact contact dot ID is equal to contact ID. So this way I would get the contact based on this contact ID. Now I will check if that contact, if we found that contact, if there is something in this contact variable, then call this function. And before calling this function, we want to pass that contact in that array. So if we pass an array of that contact, then that would use that contact, that array of contacts, and would process on them, and it would delete those contacts. So let's see what we have done so far. Okay, so here I have to use this function to call it, and instead of this, I just want to pass the ID of the contact. Okay, now, oh, something is wrong here. Let's see what is wrong here. Selected control declare and the okay. It is saying that so so this parameter and this variable both are defined in the same name. That is why it is conflicting with each other. So it is saying that this variable is already defined, so you cannot define it again. So instead of using same name, I'm going to use p select. P I stands for a parameter. It is just my convention, but you can use any name if you want. So now it is fine. It would not crash. So I have selected few of them, and if I want to remove a contact with hello, let's see if that works. Something wrong happened. It has unselected. Actually, I know what is going on. So when I delete something, it re-render the all of these rows. So it removes all of these rows. So if it removes all of these rows from the UI, that's when the selected class was also removed. So it re-rendered it from scratch. But at that time, there was no selected property on it. So we have to add selected property as well there. So if contact is selected, then there should be selected property. So I'm going to add a condition here. If contact dot selected, then add selected. Otherwise, don't add anything. So I hope you understand how this ternary operator works. So this is just if else condition. If it is true, then return this string. Otherwise, return this string. So this string is empty. If it returns this string, then we will have the selected class appended after these two classes. So now it should go fine. So I deleted the hello. So just hello was deleted, but all other oh, 1 second, something is wrong here. It has added a selected property, and that is now changing the background color. That is perfect. But the checkbox is not checked yet. The reason is that it is re-rendering the rows, and here we in this checkbox we did not say that it should be checked. So let's add that checked ch is equal to. So it should be true or false based on the contact selection. If contact is checked, so selected, let's just use this value. If it is selected, then it would be true. Otherwise, it would be false. Okay, I am going to still delete this. Something wrong happened. It is showing that selected checkbox for everyone. So this is not the right thing. So actually, I don't want to add this attribute at all if it is not selected. So I would add if contact is selected, then uh, then add this string or return this string in this. Otherwise, don't add any string. This is again a ternary operator. So you can see I have added selected few contacts. Now I'm going to delete the hello. And now it is looking very perfect. And you can see we have 3 selected remaining. We have checkboxes working fine. We have the background color. So now you can delete all of these contacts at once by clicking on the delete icon, or you can delete one of them by clicking on the delete button. By the way, you don't need to select it, delete it. Oh, something is wrong here. When I unselect it, it is not removing the selected class. So let's see what is wrong there. So I guess the issue is that uh, for the first time it registers the change event on the checkboxes. But when I re-render these rows, then it removes all of those rows and their checkboxes, and it recreates those rows and checkboxes from scratch. So that's mean if it destroys the boxes, then that's mean those event listener uh, uh, would also be not functional anymore because their main elements are gone. It has re-rendered those checkboxes again, the new checkboxes are there. So these event listener would not work. So the better approach is that I'm going to move all of this code into a separate function. I'm going to cut it and remove this shit. And now create a function. One second, I just removed this one. Okay, create a function and I will name it on checkbox change. And I would receive a checkbox. What is it? So we don't need this. We don't need this. I can just use it and I will give it. Something is wrong, I guess. The color has been changed of this tag, these tags, so I guess we have missed some brackets maybe. So let me see. Okay, I think this is wrong. We don't need this one. All right, so I can use this function here. So this is the checkbox. Here I can add an event. You can also register an event in as inline event listener. So here just add on change and call this function and pass the event. Let's see if that works. Okay, you can see that I guess it is working. And if I remove this one, yeah, it is working perfectly now. So I think that's all that I wanted to show you in this video. So I hope you liked what I have shown you. If you have any questions, then please ask them in the comments box. And please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And see you in the next video. Thank you.